So let's talk about the forces that are sort of conspiring against these workers a little bit. Um, the way I sort of saw it as I was reading the book, you have the political forces, which are very bipartisan in a lot of ways,
Mhm.
and historically have been in Arkansas going back to the Bill Clinton days. You have local media that isn't actually doing super critical coverage. And then you have COVID itself that becomes this force that's larger than life and really sort of takes over this book and puts Tyson under the microscope in a new way. Can you talk a little bit about these political forces, the media ones, and then, we'll get into the meat of COVID after that.
Yeah, it was really important to me to focus on the bipartisan support for the meatpacking industry, the power of the lobbying, because it's not a partisan issue in terms of support. And it was also interesting to me, once again, because Bill Clinton, who was governor of Arkansas, a two-time governor, and became president, was a close friend of the Tyson family. And that's history that I feel like I was discovering in terms of, the them driving around in Don Tyson's Bentley together, all these kinds of good old boy activities and parties and flying around in the private jet. I think that's important to revisit, and also puts the focus not on one party or another, but on safety in an industry that's very dangerous and that affects a huge number of workers in the United States. And so I really wanted to explore that, especially because of the connection to Arkansas.
Yeah, and it's quite powerful. And as I was reading this book, I was actually looking up campaign contributions of Tyson, and I mean, it's incredible. Like they play every side of the aisle, up and down the ballot, so they have this sort of iron hold on it. But let's talk about COVID because, as Patricia alluded to at the beginning of the book, we're introduced to this chemical explosion at the plant that weakens a lot of these workers and actually makes them even more susceptible to the worst effects of COVID, ultimately killing one of them. Um, what safety guards does Tyson have? And was there a shift during COVID? I mean, just fill people in a little bit more on the details. I'd love to flesh out like what Tyson was doing and what they weren't doing.
hmm So the interesting thing for me was I started reporting this at the beginning of COVID, and I was really focusing on what is happening during COVID. I had no plans to go talk about a chemical accident or anything like that. But what happened was that several of the workers who died of COVID, Tyson workers, had been in a chemical accident they discovered over time, destroyed their lungs. And so it was for me a way to connect the horrors of the COVID time period with, earlier issues with safety at Tyson, in terms of how they're managing chemicals. A lot of it has to do also with how they're managing training and translation. Imagine having workers who speak 20 or 30 different languages in one plant. And you have a lot of, in this case, the chemicals when mixed produced a weapons grade, agent that harmed a lot of workers. And so there's a lot of issues related to translation, to training, but also to enforcement. When it comes to ocean fines, the fines during COVID for violation of COVID protocols and regulations were maybe, like, one plant in Colorado was fined $15,500. So if many workers are dying of COVID, but the fine is $15,500, what is that saying to companies like Tyson?